Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mining Match. You know, First, we're going to mention our sponsor. If you are in the mining industry and you're working in Latin America or you speak Spanish, you should join Hispanomine. We provide business development, also professional development, and to connect in the Hispanic community. All right, so today we're going to discuss something very important. If you're doing resource estimations, you need to communicate this information in a proper way. And there are codes, and everybody does it differently. And there are jurisdictions, and it could be a bit complicated sometimes. So if you want to be in the game, you have to follow the rules. Our guest speaker today is Dr. Ilieva. She's joining us to tell us more details about mineral resource reporting. Whenever you're ready, Tania.
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. Online, probably. I
Good.
hope you can see the presentation.
Yes, it's clearly.
So I just want to do a little introduction, and I'm a senior geologist. I graduated more than 25 years ago, and I keep working in different fields, mainly mineral exploration, resource estimation. So I worked on many different commodities in Bulgaria, Canada, Guyana, Central America. I have a project in Cameroon. I had several projects in Russia, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan. So I'm working on a variety of deposits, and every time when I have to go and start a new project, I just see different type of reporting systems and reports, and I spent a lot of time to figure out which one is equivalent to our well-known resource estimation categories. So these are the projects of the whole company, and you can see that our company has a lot of experience all over the world. In many cases, I consulted co-workers. In many cases, I consulted people that are directly in the country, so that at the end of the day, we can get a realistic presentation of whatever is our estimate about a mineral resource in the ground. So every mining project has different stages, and every mining project looks differently in the eyes of an investor, regulator, consulting geologist. So usually this is the mining project in the eyes of an investor. Usually at the beginning you acquire a good property, somebody can sell your project, or you can stake a claim on wine or on ground, and then you try to raise money. If it's an earlier stage exploration, then you have to drill a few holes, and your dream is to sell the project, get some money and move to the next one. Or if you are not into the exploration business, you're dreaming about starting a mine and get rich. So this is a good dream. And Canadian history is full with examples that in many cases it can happen, but there are a lot of examples where it's not going to happen exactly this way. So usually the general life cycle of an exploration and mining project includes early stage exploration. This could be grassroots exploration, and it includes a lot of research, reconnaissance, exploration, data compilation, conversion, compilation again, data processing again. Then at one point we are ready for regional reconnaissance, airborne prospecting, some kind of ground field work. And hopefully we are ready to make our discovery. When we have our discovery, this whole process can take from 1 to, let's say, many years, 5, 10, 15. When we have our discovery, usually to include several technical reports that are addressed to different companies. In many cases, the project was flipped several times. The whole idea is to inform the investors so that the investors can decide if they want to invest in our project or if they want to move somewhere else. So when we have some kind of at least initial resource estimate, then we have to start doing environmental and social impact assessments. The next stage is the so-called mineral deposit appraisal. After several drilling programs, we get to a point where we have to estimate the mineral resource and the net project value. So usually we do this during the preliminary economic assessment. And in the PEA, usually we have a statement of the mineral resource that includes measures indicated in FERT. When we decide that the project merits additional exploration and additional technical studies, then in many cases people have to raise money from investors and move to pre-feasibility, feasibility studies, and after the pre-feasibility and feasibility studies, then we can estimate the mineral reserves. They're usually in two categories, proven and probable. The next stage is to work on the permitting and start project financing, construction, commissioning, and at the end we get to the mine production, environmental monitoring, restoration, and at every different stage we have to file a lot of technical reports. So most of you know the different stages, so it's not something that is new for you. We are talking about the different reporting systems, but we have to go a little bit back in the history just to say few words of the main reasons for the reporting codes and the guidelines. There were several big scams in the mining industry, and probably a lot of you know that the first one was in Australia, the so-called Poseidon nickel boom, and it's boom and bust. And this was one of the reasons for the creation of the Australian Joint Ore Reserves Committee and the JORC Code. A little bit later was created the Pan-European Reserves and Resources Reporting Committee and Code, and then Canada had their share of boom and bust, but the biggest project that was a big scam is the BRIEX project. The BRIEX Minerals had a project in Indonesia, and after this scam in Canada, the regulators created the national instrument NI 43-101, Standards of Disclosure for Mineral Projects, approved by CIM Council. So this national instrument was published in 2001, and since 2001 there are thousands of reports that are prepared following the guidelines and the template of this NI 43-101 code. So approximately at the same time was published the Pan-European Reporting Code. There is a commission, international commission, that was created in 1994, the so-called Committee for Mineral Reserves International Reporting Standards. And there are a lot of countries that participate in this. So we are not going to go through the whole history from 1994 to 2019, but I'll just show some of the members in this career scope. Australia, Brazil, Canada, Chile, and Peru, United Kingdom, and European Union, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, Russia, South Africa, United States, and a few others. So when we are talking about our reports, technical reports, we have something in mind. Usually the target audience for these technical reports are the exploration and mining companies and their investors, the financial and investment community, banks, brokerages, and the consulting companies. We all are on a different side and everybody has their own perspective, but for example, BMO is one of the big investors. Most of the Canadian banks are involved in mining and mineral projects. They all have their staff, but to start the whole process, usually the exploration and mining companies get an independent consultant to prepare the report. There are three fundamental principles, and this is transparency, competence, and materiality. So PERC has some additional requirements, but this is a little bit too much going into the details. So the general relationship between exploration results, mineral resources, and mineral reserves were published. They are in every single reporting code. We start with the explorational results, then we go to the first mineral resource estimate. In many cases, you have inferred category mineral resources. With the increasing level of geological knowledge and confidence, we get to indicated, and hopefully one day we get to the measured resources. So the indicated and measured, they can be converted to mineral reserves after pre-feasibility and feasibility studies. So the mineral reserves, the official categories are probable and proven reserves. You have to keep in mind all the so-called modifying factors. So there are a lot of similarities, and sometimes when you open the different reporting codes and you say, okay, it's almost the same, it's the same, there are some small differences. They all set the minimum standards for the public reporting. They all codes provide extensive guidelines. There are special documents that were prepared that are guidelines for the best exploration practices or best exploration practices for mineral resources and mineral reserves estimation. And all codes require that the public reports are based on work that was undertaken by a qualified person or a competent person. So, however, some of the codes, the JORC code, PERC, and NI 43101, they don't regulate the procedures used by the qualified person to estimate the mineral resources and reserves. These codes, they don't tell me, okay, in ordinary kriging is a better method for resource estimation than nearest neighborhood or polygonal or whatever. So the QP, based on the experience, based on the type of deposit, based on the other criteria, can choose exactly what kind of procedures are more appropriate for this type of project. There is something else that people are sometimes confused. NI 43101 or JORC report does not replace the government reporting system. You still have to file assessment reports if you work in Canada. You still have to file a report with the local Ministry of Mines or with the regulator that is the governmental reporting agency. If this governmental agency has a different reporting system, too bad for the geologists. They have to do everything twice, 3 times, or whatever, how many times it's required. And every company has several mineral resource and reserve estimates. First time they do this roughly, and then they start determining additional targets, and they are doing additional drill programs, additional resource estimates. So JORC or NI 43101 report does not regulate the internal classification or reporting system. If they want, they can call them A, B, C, D. If they want, they can call them class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4, class 5 for their internal purposes. Job code, PERC, NI 43101 regulate only the reports that will be published and that will be used for fundraising or for informing the public or for informing your investors. So there are a lot of different amendments. Recently, everybody decided that for the early stage exploration, it's nice to have exploration target, and it's nice to have some kind of definitions for reporting exploration results. You know, the exploration takes a long, long, long time. So many times you have to tell your investors, okay, we did this, we expanded the mineralized zone from 500 meters to 600 meters or whatever. So that's why recently the reporting of the exploration targets was included in all standards. So there is something else that is important. A mineral resource must have reasonable prospects for eventual economic extraction. If you feel that you'll never get to a point to mine the resources, you can keep calling them mineralized zones or whatever, but you can't call them mineral resources. So we very often we get some kind of questions from our clients. Can you estimate the resource? We have geophysical anomaly that is 5 kilometers long. No, mineral resource cannot be estimated in the absence of sampling information. So sufficient reporting, supporting information has to be provided so that the investors can evaluate their own risk. In many cases, when we deal with several metals, we work with metal equivalents. Assumptions used for the reporting of the metal equivalent values should be clearly stated, and a reporting of each element is required according to all codes. Pre-feasibility is required to declare a statement of mineral or ore reserve. So the so-called in situ or in-ground resource or some kind of variation of this are not permitted in a technical report that will be published according to NI 43101, JORC, PERC, or some of the other codes. Some of the other codes, like PERC and JORC, they have table 1. It's called Table of Assessment and Reporting Criteria. This is practically a checklist of assessment criteria and guidelines for reporting. You have to fill the table and attach it at the end of the report, or in Australia, if you have to report to Australian regulators, you have to publish this table 1 even if you have a news release. So there was introduced something that is called effective date. And this is the date that is mainly the cutoff date for the data. So you can publish the report in May 2021 if the cutoff of the data is, let's say, May 2020. This is your cutoff date. You might have additional drill holes, you might have additional measurements, some kind of additional studies. If your effective date is May 2020, the data from the later studies are not included in this report. There is something else that is called if not, why not. If the information is not disclosed, then the authors of the report should have an explanation why it is not disclosed. So it sounds a little bit of confusing, but if I don't provide QAQC plots in the report, that is a mineral resource estimate, I have to say why. Because the mineral, because the sampling didn't have QAQC, or because the QAQC failed, or what? What is the reason? And there are many other examples like this. If I don't provide information about land tenure, which is, or if I provide very limited information about the land tenure, I should say why. Because it's one of the risk factors. When it comes to, claim information, land tenure information, our recommendations are consult a lawyer. And in the technical report, usually we put a statement. Micron is not qualified to discuss the land tenure. The investor should consult a lawyer and ask for legal opinion. So this is our explanation why it's not discussed. And the last so-called amendment was that the QP has to disclose the relationship to the project owner. You can be a QP from the company and you say, I work for this company as a senior geologist. You still are a QP. Or you can be independent QP and you say, I'm an independent from the company. The company paid me a consulting fee and I have no interest into the company and subsidiaries and the project. So these are mainly standard clauses that we get from some of the recommendations from the security commissions, and we just put this in the report so that the investors are well informed who participated in writing the report. It comes from the employees of the company, or it comes from people that are not an employee of the company. So CRISCO has some kind of different standard definitions. They're almost the same like the ones that we discussed, but every time when you work with one of their standards, it's nice to go and download their template. They have a big template on their web page with it's a PDF file. You can download it, you can read it, but practically the standard definitions that is public report, competent person, modifying factor, exploration target, exploration result, mineral resource, inferred resource, indicated resource, measured resource, mineral reserve, probable reserve, proven reserve, scoping study, pre-feasibility study, and feasibility study. The same as CIM NI 43101. So in many cases, when we do this presentation, we are trying to see which of the news releases will pass or fail, let's say, our Canadian Security Commission. So we mentioned the you know, the key phrases that should be used. So I'll just give you a second to take a look at these two screenshots from the news release and see if we can identify. So in the first one, if you can see this one, we are talking about mineral resource, and they're using proven, probable, possible. There's no such thing like proven resource, probable resource, or possible resource. We have measured, indicated, inferred resources. In the second, they're talking about resource calculation. We are talking about resource estimate. There are so many questions and there are so many unknowns in one resource estimate that using the word calculation means that we somehow mislead the investors that this is the number and this is what you are going to get. So that's why the word, the phrase resource calculation is not correct and it's not acceptable. When the issuers have some kind of issues with their technical reporting and news release, in many cases, Canadian Security Commission will force them to publish something that is a correction. They call this clarification, they call this corrections, it's not good. So we are trying to provide reports and press releases that doesn't require additional clarifications, corrections, etc. When we read the reporting codes 2, 3, 5 times, we start to understand. So the following terms are considered misleading. JORC compliant, NI 43 compliant. Usually the Security Commission is the one that decides if it's compliant or not. We prepare the report following the standards and definitions of NI 43101, but we are not the one that will say if it's compliant or not. Another misleading term is global resource, probable resources, geological mineable resource. Practically, the regulators think that they have the word mineral for a reason. We don't know how much of this will be mineable because it's changing all the time. So the whole phrase geological mineable resources is not acceptable, or in situ reserves. We like the word in situ just because it shows everybody that it's still in the ground and it's not something that is for a stockpile or something for man-made deposit tailings or whatever, but the word is not acceptable. Mining reserves, usually the reserves are reserves and they're mineral reserves or ore reserves. These are the two words that are in the reporting code. The regulators don't like mining inventory. And you know, it's debatable, but they definitely don't like mineral resource calculation and mineral reserve calculation. So we are saying this based on some of our discussions and some of the comments that we've got when we write our reports. So a pan-European reporting code has additional categories that the JORC and NI 43101 don't have. So they admit that there are some circumstances in which the company may be required to record estimates without doing all the work that they have to do. And they admit that it's not always easy to meet all the requirements and to be aware of all the circumstances So in some cases, when the company submits a report to the government, they can use some other terms and definitions. So they have something that is called non-recoverable minerals or mineral. This is any mineral which for physical or administrative reason is considered to be permanently inaccessible for extraction. But PERC still requires the companies to say, okay, under Valdor, under the city limits or whatever, there are so many tons and with this amount of ounces in the ground, and they would be unrecoverable according to PERC. In Canada, we don't say this. In some cases, they admit that there are more than one mineral and they accept the term non-economic mineral. This is material which is accessible, for which currently there are no reasonable prospects for eventual economic extraction. But they consider that the economic circumstances change, and in many cases, they should know what is the non-economic mineral in the ground for this project or another project. And they say, should economic, technological, accessibility, or recoverability conditions change such that there exists a reasonable prospect for eventual economic extraction of material previously classified as non-economic material or non-recoverable mineral, these minerals may, in part or in whole, depending on the circumstances, then be publicly reported as resources or reserves. In Canada, this is not acceptable. But if you are reporting on a project in Europe, and if you are raising money in Frankfurt, you can do this, you can report it. And then they have something that is undiscovered mineral. This is any estimated quantity of mineral for which there is some evidence, but which has not yet been discovered. Report on prospectivity of exploration target. They use this undiscovered mineral. The governments are using this category when they're trying to outline exploration licenses, and in some cases, the governments are using this category to determine the fee for the license. It's not very common. In Canada, we don't do it. In some of the other countries, they do this based on hectares or based on some kind of other criteria, but there are countries in Europe where, okay, we know that there is gold here because there was an old shaft, but we don't have any supporting documents. So in this case, we'll say, okay, there is undiscovered mineral that is from point A to point B, and it's approximately this amount. This is our initial estimate. So we are going to give you a license that is from point A to point B, C, D, and this is the lease for the license. Usually this is the category that USGS, US Geological Survey, is using when they do their prospectivity reports. Okay, we assume that in Latin America, in Costa Rica, there is this amount of undiscovered material or mineral or gold, but you know, we can't estimate the quantity, and Costa Rica doesn't want us to explore. So at this point, this is our estimate.
5 more minutes.
When we are working with investors, if you are trying to raise money, we do not use undiscovered material or mineral. So because I'm originally from Bulgaria, so I work on a lot of Russian projects, and I had to read the so-called NAEN code. This is the Russian code for reporting exploration results, mineral resources many times. Initially, when I started working in Bulgaria, we had similar reporting system with A, B, C categories and P for some kind of, exploration targets. Then East Europe accepted a different reporting system, but Russia still has this system, and the Governmental Commission of Mineral Resources and Mineral Reserves still has a lot of documentations in ABC categories. So there was a commission in Russia, and they worked together with other international commissions, and they prepared the so-called NAEN code. And the figure that you see here is directly from the NAEN code. So their resource category, P1, in many cases, it could be equivalent to inferred resources. Usually P2 is more like exploration target. P1 is, in many cases, could be equivalent to inferred resources. C2 and C1 in many cases are equivalent to indicated. It depends on the detail of exploration work in some cases, and it depends on the type of the deposit. In some cases, C1, B, and A are equivalent to measured. And then you can convert the mineral resources into the corresponding mineral reserves categories. So if they have their reserves in C1, probably this is equivalent to probable reserves. If they have this in A and B category, usually it's equivalent to proved reserves. So every time when we are trying to convert from one system to another, we have to keep in mind additional factors. When the exploration was done, how good was the lab at the time, how good was the downhole survey. There are many, many other factors. So this figure is just a rough, a rough comparison. So this is the recommended conversion from JKZ, Governmental Commission of Mineral Resources and Reserves, to CRISCO categories. So practically it is whatever I had in the previous slide, just it's a little bit more visual.
Minutes.
And I mentioned that in Bulgaria and some other countries, people use the United Nations code. So this is international and local reporting systems in Ukraine, Bulgaria, some other countries in East Europe, in Central Asia, in China, and everywhere where United Nations sponsored, financed some kind of exploration program. So I don't know how many people are familiar with the United Nations reporting system. It includes hard rock minerals and oil and gas. So we have three major groups and we have three main criteria. So we say that this is three-tiered system. The first is the geological knowledge. The second criteria is the project feasibility. And the third criteria is socioeconomic criteria. In many cases, some of the countries, they develop mining projects not just because they're very profitable. Because they want to lift the people out of the poverty, to create local employment, they prefer to give these people business instead of giving them welfare. So this was one of the systems, one of the criteria that was used in Bulgaria many years ago. Currently, there are a lot of financing from Canadian government, from World Bank, from some other international institutions. In many cases, the mining is the first step to get out of poverty. The father will work as a miner, the kids will graduate school, and they'll move on. Until the mine is closed, the whole community lives at a totally different social environment. That's why the United Nations includes this socioeconomic viability. I think that if somebody has to use the system, when you see 123 or 333 or 222, you have to go and download the code and start looking at this very, very carefully. So probably the next slide will make it a little bit better, but if the project is feasible and you have mineral resources and mineral reserves and everything is perfect, the project makes money, then it will be in category 111. When it's an early stage exploration project, almost greenfield exploration, it will be in category 333. Very little geological knowledge, or even 334. Very little geological knowledge. We don't know anything about the feasibility, so we don't really can put 1 or 2, we can put 3 or 4, which means there are a lot of unknowns. And we still don't know what will be the impact on the local community. But when we know that it will be a mine that will make money and it's a good project, then it's in category 111. So this is the Chinese reporting system. And I don't know if you see it very well, but in this case, I hope you see it. You can see this as a flat table, and probably this flat table can, give you a little bit more information. So you can see the level of the exploration, you can see the different categories, and you can see the code, with the numbers. So based on our experience in MyCon, we looked at many projects. And based on our experience, we prepared a comparison table between ClearSco and other resource and reserve classification. So JORC, CIM, PERC, NAM, these are the main reporting codes for the members of ClearSco. And then we have the resources in measured, indicated, and inferred, and we have exploration target or exploration potential. Then we have the reserves in proven and probable categories, and the Russian state classification is only reserves. They use the word reserves, although it includes resources and reserves. And they have A, B, and C1, which is equivalent to measured or proven. They have B, C1, C2, which is equivalent to probable reserves or indicated resources, and they have C1 and P1, which is equivalent to inferred resources. P2 and P3 is equivalent to exploration target. And at the bottom, you see the United Nations classification system that was modified in 2009. They, in their geological knowledge, they still use measured, indicated, and inferred and predicted, but you have to keep in mind that they don't totally overlap our measured, indicated, and inferred categories. So I hope you're not very tired after the long presentation. And this was my presentation. I hope it was useful for those of you that listened to the end.
Thank you, Tania. Okay, so, and for you that are right now on YouTube, we will finish this transmission, and thank you very much for attending.